starts with a mistake people still make today, treating fire like the enemy. For a long time, fire has been seen as something wild, destructive, something that needs to be controlled or completely eliminated. Entire systems were built around that idea. Suppress it, block it, fight it. But that thinking quietly created the exact problem it was trying to solve. Because when fire disappears from the land, something else builds up. Dry grass piles up. Dead wood collects. Dense vegetation takes over. And slowly, almost invisibly, the land becomes overloaded with fuel. Then one day, lightning strikes, or a spark catches, and suddenly that quiet buildup turns into something unstoppable. Flames climb higher, burn hotter, and move faster than anything that came before. That's what turns ordinary fires into megafires. Now here's where things take a turn. Because long before modern firefighting even existed, there were communities who didn't fear fire at all. They understood it. They worked with it. They shaped entire landscapes using it. Indigenous fire farming wasn't about stopping fire. It was about guiding it. Instead of waiting for massive, uncontrollable fires, small and carefully timed burns were set across the land. These weren't random. They weren't reckless. They were precise. Every fire had a purpose, and every patch of land was treated differently depending on what it needed. These burns stayed low to the ground. Flames moved slowly, almost gently, across grasses and leaf litter. The heat never got intense enough to destroy the soil underneath. Seeds remained intact. Nutrients stayed in place. The land wasn't being destroyed. It was being reset. And that changes everything. Because when fire moves like that, it doesn't wipe life out. It makes room for it. After a cultural burn, something remarkable happens. Within days or weeks, fresh green shoots begin to appear. Grasses grow back stronger. Herbs start to spread. Plants that had been buried or suppressed suddenly get their chance to grow. And it doesn't stop there. Animals follow. Kangaroos return to graze on the new grass. Birds arrive, searching through the ash for insects and food. Even smaller creatures begin to repopulate the area. The entire ecosystem starts rebuilding itself, almost like it had been waiting for that exact moment. Now compare that to what happens during a megafire. When fires burn too hot, they don't just clear the surface. They go deeper. The heat penetrates the soil and destroys seeds before they ever get a chance to grow. Nutrients are burned away. The ground becomes dry, lifeless, and in many cases, recovery takes years, if it happens at all. That's the difference between fire used with knowledge and fire left unchecked. But here's where it gets even more interesting. In some landscapes, especially in dry desert regions, certain plants actually dominate everything around them. Take spinifex grass, for example. It grows thick, spreads wide, and competes aggressively with other plants. Its root systems go deep, pulling up water and resources. Some scientists even believe it releases chemicals that stop nearby plants from growing. So over time, one species takes over. Diversity disappears. The land becomes less productive. But introduce a controlled fire into that system, and everything shifts. That dominant plant gets cleared out. Its hold on the land weakens. And suddenly, all those hidden seeds beneath the surface, sometimes dozens of different species, get their opportunity. Nutrients from the ash feed the soil. Competition for water drops. Sunlight reaches the ground again. And when rain finally comes, the transformation is almost unbelievable. What used to look like a dry, empty landscape starts to bloom. Multiple plant species emerge at once. Some produce food, others support animals. The entire area becomes more alive, more balanced, and far more productive than before. This is where the idea of tripled crop yields begins to make sense. Because it's not about farming in the modern sense of planting rows and harvesting mechanically. It's about creating the conditions where nature produces more on its own. Bush foods grow more abundantly. Edible seeds become easier to harvest. Animals that rely on these plants increase in number. The entire food system strengthens. And all of that starts with fire. But not just any fire. Timing matters. Temperature matters. Even the pattern of how fire moves across the land matters. Indigenous fire management often uses a patchwork approach, where different sections of land are burned at different times. This creates a mosaic of landscapes, each at a different stage of regrowth. Some areas are freshly burned and growing new plants. Others are slightly older, providing shelter for animals. And some remain untouched, acting as safe zones. That variation is key, because when a wildfire does occur, it doesn't find one continuous stretch of fuel. It encounters breaks. It slows down. Sometimes it stops entirely. There are real cases where areas treated with cultural burning experienced far less damage during major fires. Lower fuel levels meant flames stayed smaller. Trees weren't scorched all the way to their canopies. In some situations, entire sections of land acted as natural barriers, protecting nearby communities. So instead of reacting to disasters, this method prevents them from growing in the first place. And yet, for a long time, this knowledge was ignored. Traditional burning practices were once seen as dangerous or unnecessary. Authorities dismissed them, favoring large-scale hazard reduction burns instead. But those burns often ran hotter and covered wider areas, sometimes causing more harm than good. Over time, the results became impossible to ignore. Fuel loads kept returning quickly. Fires kept getting worse. Landscapes became more fragile instead of more resilient. Meanwhile, the older methods, refined over tens of thousands of years, continued to show consistent results wherever they were applied. Because this wasn't guesswork. It was built on observation, on understanding how plants grow, how animals behave, how seasons shift, and how different ecosystems respond to fire. It's a system where fire isn't just a tool. It's part of a relationship. Land isn't treated like a resource to be used and discarded. It's treated like something that needs care, attention, and balance. And that mindset changes how everything is done. Burn too hot, and the land suffers. Burn at the wrong time, and plants won't recover properly. Burn too often or too little, and the balance breaks. But get it right, and the results speak for themselves. Healthier soil, stronger plant growth, more biodiversity, and significantly lower risk of catastrophic fires. That's not theory. That's lived experience passed down over thousands of years. And now, modern science is finally catching up. Researchers studying these landscapes have started to recognize just how effective these practices are in some of the harshest environments on Earth. And that connection between fire and food is something that often gets overlooked. Because in these systems, fire isn't separate from agriculture. It is agriculture. Instead of planting crops in rows, the land is encouraged to produce food naturally. Edible plants grow more densely after burns. Seeds become easier to collect. Even insects and small animals become reliable food sources. In environments where resources are limited, that makes a huge difference. Especially in desert regions, where survival depends on knowing exactly where and when to find food. There are accounts of landscapes that appear almost empty at first glance. Dry, harsh, unforgiving. But with the right knowledge, those same areas reveal an abundance of resources. Food hidden beneath the soil, water sources invisible to the untrained eye, animals that can only be tracked by subtle signs. And fire plays a role in unlocking all of it. By clearing dominant vegetation and resetting growth cycles, it makes those resources more accessible. It turns scarcity into opportunity. That's why this knowledge has lasted for tens of thousands of years. Because it works, not just in theory, but in practice, across different environments, across changing conditions. And now, there's growing recognition of just how advanced this system really is. Scientists studying these practices have started to see patterns that align with ecological principles: nutrient cycling, species regeneration, habitat management. Concepts that are often studied in laboratories have been applied in real-world conditions for thousands of years. and in many cases, with better results. Even today, large portions of natural environments remain poorly understood. There are still countless plant and animal species yet to be documented, entire ecosystems that haven't been fully explored. But indigenous communities have been living within those systems, observing them, adapting to them, and managing them long before modern science began studying them. That depth of knowledge isn't easily replaced, and it highlights something important. Technology alone isn't always the answer. Sometimes the solution already exists, just in a different form. Reintroducing cultural burning isn't about going backward. It's about integrating knowledge that has already proven itself over time. Because the cost of ignoring it has become clear. More frequent megafires, greater environmental damage, higher risks to communities, and landscapes that struggle to recover. But where these traditional methods are reintroduced, a different pattern begins to emerge. Healthier vegetation, more balanced ecosystems, reduced fire intensity, and most importantly, resilience. Land that can handle fire without being destroyed by it. That's the real goal. Not eliminating fire entirely, but making sure it behaves in a way that supports life instead of wiping it out. And that shift in perspective changes everything. Fire stops being something to fear and becomes something to understand. Because in the right hands, at the right time, and under the right conditions, fire doesn't take life away, it brings it back. And maybe that's the biggest lesson in all of this, that the difference between destruction and renewal isn't the fire itself, it's how it's used. So instead of asking how to stop fire completely, the better question becomes, how to work with it, how to bring back balance, and how to rebuild systems that were once able to thrive for thousands of years without collapsing into disaster. Because the answer has been there all along, written into the land, passed down through generations, and proven through time. And now it's finally being seen for what it truly is. Not just tradition, but one of the most effective environmental management systems ever developed. If this changed the way fire is seen, make sure to hit like, subscribe, and share this with someone who needs to hear it. Because sometimes, the oldest knowledge holds the most powerful solutions.